Hello, Viv. Are you all right?
I am. That was a bit of a posh intro, wasn't it?
I didn't hear it. Let me know, guys, if you heard it. It might be a problem on my end. I can't hear it. I can. Hi, you Wayne. Hope you're good, buddy.
I Wayne.
This played a new intro, but I didn't hear it. So if you've heard it, let me know if you heard the intro, because I didn't. So yeah, probably my end. Know me. Anyway, everybody. I hope everybody's all right since we last spoke to you. Oh, less than 24 hours ago now, I'd imagine. So everybody's holding up and doing well. How are you doing today, Viv? How are you doing?
Oh, I've been down the hospital today to have an ECG and blood tests. I've been a brave girl. It's just a pre-check for my operation that I'm having. It's just a small little thing, but because they're putting me out, they got to go over the top, and they with it all. Really, I suppose. I don't know.
They do, don't they? They've got to check you thoroughly now, haven't they? They dare not, to be honest with you. Good evening, William. I hope you're well. And
Hello, William.
Things are fine and dandy in your neck of the woods.
Wayne, did you hear any sound? Did you hear the sound? Was there any sound or music with it? He'll let us know. He's a good lad, isn't he? He's a good lad, isn't he?
He is a good lad. Well, this evening, he's just there at the moment. We've got a chap on called Andy McGrath. Shall I bring him into the chat?
Yeah, bring him in. Introduce him and bring him in. Yeah, bring him in and introduce him.
Bring him in. Add to stream. Hello there, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Yeah,
we really do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's very kind of you. So I was just introducing you, actually, and I was just going to say, and tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the wonderful Andy McGrath, the author of two fantastic books on cryptids. One is Beasts of Britain, which I've got a copy of that. There's another one, Beasts of the World.
I'll put my T-shirt on specially for you.
Oh, look at that.
There he is.
I can't wait to get to Cliff's. I've never been there to Cliff's Bigfoot Centre, and I'd love to go. Absolutely love to go.
Viv's just got back from there, haven't you, Viv?
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I've been there a few times now. I think he's fed up of seeing me, to be honest.
Oh, bless him. He's got the patience of a saint. I don't mean because he puts up with you, Viv, but all of us.
It's true.
It puts up with all of us, and
I did bring back one of these.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
So it's a I can't see it very well.
Is that from the Skookum cast? I mean, is that the handprint, or I don't know? That's from something else. What's that one?
That one is.
I think that's one of Chris's, isn't it? That's one of his. He put his hand down, didn't he?
I think that comes from Kentucky. That print comes from Kentucky.
Is that one that Charlie Raymond found with No, it's not. It's somebody else. I'm sure. I should know this.
He did, but I haven't.
I should know this.
I haven't got it.
It's a very famous handprint.
I can tell you about the foot, though. I've got the foot.
You've got the foot there. Have you got the foot? The information on the back.
Got the foot. Hang on.
Show the foot, Viv.
Let's get the foot.
I think your foot is bigger, Dan, but mine is a bit skinnier and longer.
Okay, let's have a look.
So
they're both cool. What they are.
So there's my foot, and this is 1982 Grays Harbor, Washington.
Let me get that. Oh wow, fantastic!
And he did sign the back for me. He told me where it was.
Wow. Oh, he's such a good chap. In fact, I was talking with him today on the email, and thanking him for saying that he will stock the books in the NABC. He'll stock my books there now. So,
good.
We just got to send some across now, I guess. But he's such a nice chap. I don't know him well. I met him one time in Kentucky, funny enough, in a conference, and spoke to him afterwards, and Bobo, and was once on the podcast, and I had a few email back and forths, and really, I've got to say, for a lot of those guys, not just those two, but a lot of them, considering the amount of attention essentially they must get from everybody, they just seem to be very regular, down to earth. Really nice. Really nice.
To be
I'm going to drink my
fair,
coffee a little bit while I'm talking to
No,
you.
you carry on.
Yeah.
Carry. Don't let it go cold.
Don't tell Chris though. But I was more impressed with the guy that runs the shop, because he had a plethora of information about all the casts and things that were there, and he even had a cast of Bigfoot's buttocks, the cheeks, where he'd sat down, and we were talking about that. It was just absolutely amazing, and the people that cast them. So yeah, I enjoyed it anyway. But anyway, I digress. Over to you guys.
You had a rollicking good time, didn't you? And you held into to find your casts.
I did, yeah.
Did you go out hiking in the area, the local area as well?
I did, and I did go hiking where Bigfoot is notoriously seen, but obviously I didn't see anything. But then I didn't go out really looking. I was enjoying where I was. You know, I don't know the first thing about Sasquatching.
But not only that, I mean, there's a bunch of bears and cougars and all kinds of things out there in that environment. You know, you want to go with somebody for a start. Who knows where they're going? You know, even I would do that.
I did bring back a CD with it's got some Bigfoot sounds and calls on it.
Okay.
So
Bigfoot's top 20 hit, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's the Sierra Sounds I've got.
Oh yes, very famous.
The Sierra Sounds I brought back with me.
Yeah.
But I just can't get my head around it because all this is new to me. And because of Dan, it sort of pushed me in this direction, and he made me go to the museum. I didn't even know about it. So I've learned so much in such a short time, but it's all too much information all at once, and I've got
it's fun.
Overload.
It's really fun, and even now, like almost 29 years later, after first getting into it, there's a city I can't remember. Even now, I'm writing the next book at the moment, the second book in the Beast of the World series about water monsters, which is my favorite thing, really. Bigfoot's are kind of second to that. And even now, I'm finding out things about those types of cryptids or the different sorts of aquatic cryptids that there are. That's shocking me. I'm thinking, why have I never heard of this one? There's 10 sightings behind this one, or whatever else. You know, it's got a 100-year history. How come that one's never come up?
Yeah.
And it's just there's more. Yeah. There's more and more, and you meet lots of unsung researchers in far out places of the world where there's no interest in this stuff, like in the UK and the US. And you know, they've just carried on regardless. They're just into it. You know, they're not looking for any acknowledgement or accolade. They're just doing it. It's amazing.
Hi, Deborah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole during the whole lockdown thing. I mean, I've always liked kind of cryptid. I've worked with animals all my life anyway. I've been a zookeeper for many, many years.
Oh, wow.
And I've always sort of worked with predators. And Bigfoot has been an interest of something, not overly interested, but it's kind of piqued my attention. And it's, you know, if there's been anything on the subject matter, I've tried to sort of follow it and chase it up and what have you. But the one thing that became apparent during lockdown, which threw me because I'd never ever before heard of it, seems to be this whole dog-man situation.
Oh, now, I've got lots of bees in my
they've been seen here as well, apparently.
I mean, what are you talking about essentially with the dog-man is, and I had a chapter in Beast of Britain about it. It was called Dog-Man Rebranding the Werewolf, right?
Yeah.
So essentially what you're looking at is in description is primarily something like a werewolf evolved, which we've got hundreds, thousands in some cases of years history in Europe, talking about stuff like that, about people who change into wolves or bipedal wolf-like creatures that are ravenous and come and try to snap up the neighborhood. So I did a whole chapter on that, and I thought, are we doing something strange with this? Are we? Is it because of the pop culture that's come along, and then suddenly, just as the same recently with this Woodwose revival in Britain with the Finding Bigfoot shows, talking about Cliff and those guys, and from 2011 onwards, there was another big resurgence in interest in the Green Man, in the Woodwose in Britain, and a whole host of sightings that appeared out of that. Now, that's not to say that they appeared right then and there, but they became known again, and people started to talk about things that they'd seen when they were kids, in the 60s and 70s, or even recently. Is that the same thing with the Dogman? Because I had gone into this field in a sort of a visible way around about the time when the American scene had switched from Bigfoot to Dogman.
Yeah.
And then I noticed stories popping up here. Not all of them new, some of them quite old actually, but they, with Linda Godfrey's books were very popular as well. The Bray Road Beast and everything else she did. I started noticing these sightings popping up here, and even a couple of well-known researchers sort of switching overnight, because of course you want to be interested in what's interesting and happening at the time.
Yeah.
And I've actually come up with a new theory on it, and it was not a new theory. It's a rehashed theory, but I think it applies to the werewolf as well, and that's about these giant monkey reports all around the world. Now I know Lauren Coleman and Patrick Keeg, they wrote about this in their book, the guide to what is it called? I should know that name. I don't remember anything anymore. I've got so many thoughts in my head. Anyway, in their book, they wrote about these giant monkeys, 4.5 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet tall, with these sort of long arms, skinny legs, and baboon-like faces with these pointy ears. Could the werewolf legends be a sort of a relic population or a functionally extinct population of these giant monkeys in Europe that is still reported in places like South America, where you have the salvaje or the isnachi, which is a sort of an upright giant monkey, tailed monkey, or the kradan of the Himalayas that some famous explorers, were nearly torn to pieces by a troop of them. These 4.5 foot, 5 foot tall monkeys in the Gosakan Pass in Nepal. Could it be something like that? And they still exist in these little pockets in the world, and yet in our world here, and people always use what's in their mental library to describe things around them. So to our ancient ancestors, a giant monkey with a big sort of baboon-like snout and pointy ears, well, that would be a wolf, a standing wolf, wouldn't it? Is that possible? Is that one possible explanation? And that's that's sort of bugged me. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but that's plagued me for a long time.
I was reading up recently about obviously dogmen, and then sort of seeing how far back I could track it. And they were saying that Marco Polo had dealings with them. Apparently, he had dealings with this breed of dogman on some island that he could actually converse with, he could deal with, and he could he could sort of bargain with.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know. That's 100 years ago. I don't know if there's any credibility to it or any truth in it, but it seems it's cropped up more than once.
I wonder if this is to do with people fulfilling certain functions before. There's a lot of old portraits of saints from the Middle Ages where they have dogs' heads. That dog-headed saints, I think.
Yeah.
There's a load of things like that. And one of the things in the book, sorry, plug again, but one of the things in the book I was wondering about before was, is there perhaps something in our ancient pagan past about these rituals, some of the sacrifices we did, especially in things like ancient Greece? Probably know it's from the book. There's that famous story about King Lycaon being changed into a wolf by Zeus as punishment for killing and cooking his own son.
Yeah,
he attempts to feed to the god. And there's also the case of Pliny the Elder and Pausanias discuss Demarcus, and it takes place in ancient Greece. He takes part in an Arcadian sacrifice of an adolescent boy, whereafter he eats the entrails of the young boy, and he's transformed into a wolf for 9 years. Could we be looking at a popular resurgence of those types of things? Are there cults operating that, where either people take on the supernatural persona or are imparted with the supernatural possession, or even dress up as these creatures to enact these base ritualistic
sort of pagan rites, as it were.
Pagan rites, yeah. I mean, any pagans listening, they're not to say that you're child sacrificing baby killers, but in this ancient sense of where human sacrifice was more common, there must be one or two cults still around that still do things like that. Maybe not in the UK, but in places in the world. Is this still happening, or are people still taking part in these rituals and believing themselves to be werewolves?
Yeah, yeah. We've also got the what you call it. I think was it the 18th century one, the Beasts of Gévaudan, with
Yes,
the one in France, wasn't it? Where there was a particular, well, they put it down to werewolf attacks and what have you, didn't they? But I don't think they ever got to the bottom of that. I'm not sure what the situation was that, but
it was in sort of giant dog form in a way. A lot of people have theorized. I know Ken Gerhardt's done a great thing, a whole great investigation in this. I haven't looked into it very far, but I was always under the impression it was, an escaped pet hyena or something like that, or a rabid, large dog of some kind. So maybe even a wolf dog breed,
yeah.
a crossbreed. Who knows? It appeared to be something very, very big. I'm really wondering, from the descriptions, did somebody have a hyena,
Yeah,
in a
that would
collection?
fit in, wouldn't it? That would fit in really.
Yeah, and they really are that ravenous.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they do. They can really. I mean, they're still in places in North Africa and Africa. There's areas where people are still regularly attacked by them. On the outskirts of cities. In the new book, actually, this is the last plug, I promise.
No, you can plug it. We want you to plug
yeah.
your book. That's what we want.
Yeah, what we want the name of the book as well.
Well, the new book is called Beasts of the World, Volume 1, Hairy Humanoids. So we look at, and it's humanoid in the sense it's that vague. It's Bigfoot-like creatures, wild men, relic apes, giant monkeys, little foots, dogmen types as well, aquatic anthropoids, or amphibious anthropoids, and lots of different creatures like that appear to be, man-like in shape for the most part, hair covered for the most part, and usually summed up by most of us as Bigfoot or Bigfoot types or dogmen types. And when I started writing the book, again based on a few different theories I'd seen around, I was thinking, well, actually, it seems to be different types here. There seems to be the man-ape type that Jeff Meldrum talks about a lot, which is like Bigfoot, or maybe the big gray man, or the orang dalam of Malaysia, where they have these big sort of flat feet, like the print you've just shown me right there. They have that big Bigfoot-like print, with the mid-tarsal ridge showing in some cases. Toes all in a line, and then there seems to be a wildman type, which is around about 5.5, 6 feet tall, a bit taller sometimes. And you get those that would be like the woodwoes in Europe, the wildman, or the almasti, or the barn manu in the Caucasus Mountains and Mongolia, places like that. The Yeren would probably fall into that as well, for the most part. And we've got relic apes, things like the skunk ape, like the yeti, that seem to have that divergent toe, more ape-like in appearance and behavior, less intelligent overall, or seemingly so. And then after that, you've got a whole stream of either little foots, so little Bigfoot types, like the Telma, the little yeti, or the Janjari or Nimbinji of Australia, about 1.5 meters tall, as I say, 3.5, 4 feet tall. Like a Bigfoot, but small, or orang pendek, sometimes looking a little bit like, almost like a macaque in a way, but upright with this flat face. And then you've got other types that appear to be pygmy humans of a kind, or at least would fit into the old gnomish stereotypes, like the duende and our gnomes and liberals. And I'm just wondering, looking at this is not one creature.
No,
we're looking at not one creature. There's overlaps, and of course sometimes you've just got to draw a little line in between the types, and maybe you pull something that's a bit of a crossover into another section, and then finally at the end I found these amazing, after the monkey monsters and the dogmen, aquatic amphibious anthropoids, things like the kappa, which is a humanoid, and this depicted as being hairy sometimes, or the McGrarth, which is a little people but an aquatic one, or the Rusalka, talking about Ukraine and Russia and all these things recently.
Oh, is that the one? That's the one that tickles, isn't it?
Yes, you saw that article, I see.
Yeah.
They sold it with a
I've
funny
got your
headline
book as well. So.
Oh, thank you.
No, that's right.
Well, I mean, this is funny. Like a very famous author had that experience. Russian author. I have to find the name of him now. Just before we carry on, I have to tell you, I don't remember anything offhand. I've always got to have my notes, and because there's just so many of them. And this one was amazing. There's an opera in Ukraine and Russia about it, and she's featured throughout Slavic folklore.
Oh, I didn't realise it was that prominent.
Yes, no, really prominent. But it's like a nymph, a mermaid like creature, an Nereid in a way, a water nymph. And I think this name has been placed upon this wild woman that has a sort of a semi-aquatic nature that's occasionally seen in that area, because really all of the descriptions are very much like an almasty or something like that, but it has taken to this semi-aquatic lifestyle. Or at least she likes swimming and tickling young men to death by the sense of it. So, oh, there it is. So there's the Russian novelist Ivan Turgenev, and he told his friends Guy de Maupassant and Gustave Flaubert a story, harrowing encounter he had with a female Rusalka in his youth, 1830 or 1840. And it was in a dense forest around the Desna River in Ukraine. So it's really hot in the forest. He's really wants to go for a swim. He strips off his clothes. He jumps in. He's just floating around past the grasses and the roots, and he feels his hand touch his shoulder. And he turns to see this awful creature with this vast, wrinkled, smiling face staring at him hungrily, two large breasts floating in front of it, and a massive tangled, sun-bleached hair hanging around the face and down his back. And he's terrified. He's like this big, strong young man out in the forest. He's absolutely overcome with fear. He swims to the bank, and she's pursuing him all the time and laughing and sort of delightfully and tickling his neck and his back and his legs. And he's out of his mind at this point. Gets to the bank, runs at full speed to the woods, and leaving his gun, his clothes, everything behind. So he runs naked away from the river. And she's like chasing him, like growling, keeping pace. And he's worn out with fear, so she's ready to drop to the ground. And a boy who's watching the goats comes and whips at this beast and gets it to turn away. And he sees her running off into the trees like a female gorilla. And then the shepherds tell him later, that she's a mad woman who's lived there on their charity for 30 years or so, and always spends the day swimming in the river. But there's something funny about that, because if you look at other sightings in these areas, especially around the Caucasus Mountains, there's a lot of sightings, a lot of interactions between local people and these almasty, which are essentially like wild men, where they give them clothes or they give them a bit of food in the winter, or sometimes they come and sort of raid their vegetable patches at night. And they're always described like this, as sort of wild men, wild women, ape-like in a way, hairy. And I that made me think, no, I think we can include this. This is part of it,
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Sorry, Viv, have we got any questions there from people at all for Andy? If that's all right, Andy?
We do.
Yeah,
I'm going to scroll back. Bear with me. I did mark these off. So William Southey is mentioning the Mothman. So he said, "What about the Mothman? Do you think that the Mothman could be real, or is this conjured because that village or city, whatever you want to call it, that town had problems with poisoned water, didn't they? So for a period of time, that they were seeing something, everyone was seeing the same thing. Do you think that the Mothman could be real, or do you think it's like a mass hallucination that the town had?"
Yeah, I think it's important to exclude the obvious first. So if there was a water poisoning, and the water poisoning that could not just bring ill effects, by the way, but the effects of hallucinations, that would have to be a symptom of it for us to include it. I think, possibly, if everybody's seeing the same thing, it does seem like a strange thing to see when you're being poisoned, though. I mean, we all talk about hallucinations and, were you imagining things? But the things they want us to imagine we were imagining are really far out, aren't they? So I wonder if that could really have been it. Yeah. I think there are still, I've got some good friends. I know Lon Strickler and also the lovely people from the Singular Fortune Society are always, studying modern Mothman sightings around Chicago Airport and other places in the United States. So they seem to be current in other places where there aren't poisonings.
Sure.
So I would say on that anecdotal evidence alone, no, there must be something more to it, because people are still regularly reporting it. But it is a strange creature. We've got the Owlman, haven't we? The Owlman of Morning and
that's right. Down
Haverford West.
Yeah. It's an odd one.
Terry Davison talks of changelings.
Okay, so I think this is to do with folklore again. Almost every society in the world has tales of changelings, and I really do think these are. That's just my own thought on it. These are old wives. These are old society ways of explaining something happening to your child. This isn't the child that I was given. Something's happened to my child. It's not bright and cheery, or the child gets sick and the child was exchanged for a sickly child. It's a common theory. It's a common story in all cultures, all archaic cultures. Not to say that there couldn't be such things. Generally speaking, from my perspective, I'm just looking for animals that may exist somewhere. So I don't stretch too far into that area. And the one reason for it is that coming from a religious background myself, you appreciate how your religious viewpoint taints things.
Yeah.
It always taints things for me. And it's the same thing if you have even a philosophical viewpoint. Oh, there's fairies, there's magical beings. Well, that's going to touch everything that you look at.
Yeah.
Not to say it's wrong, but that's definitely going to be, or if you're a Muslim or a Jew or whatever. I know I'm a Christian married to a Jew. We're both religious. So, we might see the same situation slightly different, not too differently, but we definitely have a different takeaway from, the same point of view. And that's an interesting perspective to get into. In cryptozoology, especially, how often does our little belief system, how often does that affect the way we're judging this evidence? I've got and I won't labor too much, but I've got lots of friends that go into the forest a lot of times and say, look, Bigfoot's here, there's a stickling, there's an X, there's a glyph, there's a branch twirled around. And not one of them looks on the floor to see if there's like a footprint or a hair stuck. I'm just thinking, well, a 400-pound creature just put a giant X in the forest. Check out, see if there's some prints. Maybe he needed the toilet. Check that out. And
you don't know. You just don't know, do you? You don't know.
You don't know. You don't know. But if you have that perspective, you're going to see Bigfoot. Whereas, if you look in the forest for trees, then you're going to find trees, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, do you think these are common or garden creatures that we're seeing, but we're mistaken we got the wrong taxonomy on them, or what have you? The taxonomic credentials
for Bigfoot and
for Bigfoot.
I think we haven't discovered it. I'm encouraged by if there is a Bigfoot-like creature in Britain, and there's a big if really because of where it's a closed system, isn't it? There's only so much space. Yes, during studying the book, I realized there's a lot of space we're not occupying or going to in the UK because we go to lovely nature walks and mountains and things along these trails, and that's where we stay. 6.8%, I say this all the time, of the entire landmass of the UK is urban sprawl, and that includes roads and rural settlements. So, that's a lot of empty space out there. A lot of wildlife, a lot of cattle, a lot of animals, a lot of wild animals that could provide a great food source. Not to mention the rivers and things like that. But it doesn't mean it's there. It doesn't mean it's there. We still got to account for that. In the Middle Ages, we had these woodwose carvings on our cathedrals and on our noble tapestries. and then nothing. 2011, whole bunch of sightings.
Yeah, yeah.
And
but do you think it's because people weren't looking for it? They're comfortable as it was, so they weren't looking for it. So therefore, they're not going to see it.
I think that's very possible. I think if they were here and we've not discovered them, then they must definitely be cautious and elusive and against being around us. They must be have an objection to that, which obviously would come through their history with any human beings that they met, I would imagine, in the past. Yeah, if they're here, they would have had to be shy and retiring creatures that don't want to be around us. And it's possible. It's possible. You know, the Americans always say, "Well, Britain's so small," but not on foot. It's not. It's just small from Google Earth. It's small on Google Earth next to North America.
But then what about things like Canada Case, though? Because that's quite a relatively small area, isn't it? There's meant to be sightings of Bigfoot creatures there and dogmen and what have you, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. But do you give that any credence?
I just wonder if it's, you know, when I go into central London, on the outskirts of London, and I see the black painted double-decker bus with the ghost tour. They're going to take me around to the places to see the places where ghosts are. And I don't expect to see any ghosts when I get on the tour, you know, because that's everybody gets on the tour. And I'm wondering sometimes, you know, is a place like Cannock Chase, is it on the ghost tour? You know, is it just a place that people go because it's got lots of sightings and history? I know lots of people that go there quite often. I don't know anybody that's had any sort of experience there. But moving up from Cannock Chase, that whole area, Staffordshire type area, has got a lot of different sightings around the place. So that's not to say things couldn't be passing through now and again if it's just a small forest.
But then you could say that you're looking at forest areas. Now, the abominable snowman or the Yeti doesn't have the trees in the forest, which is another form of Bigfoot. That's just got the mountain caps and it's snowed. So are we looking at the wrong things, do you think, as, you know, as hobbyists or enthusiasts? Are we just looking in the wrong areas and not actually seeing what's right in front of us?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Viv. I've said a lot of times to people, we judge everything by the North American standard because that's where it's popular. You know, what's food, the food, water cover, that whole thing. But then we do have those things here, but we have more arid open spaces or mountainous spaces than we do forest spaces. That doesn't mean there's no forest, but it also doesn't mean there's no isolation.
No.
And that's what I was trying to say to people. 6.8% of this country is covered in urban sprawl. When you're driving along the motorway and you see the countryside stretching off, that's just what you can see.
Yeah.
You know, what about where there are no roads? I come from Wales, where there are actually very, compared to England, you know, very few primary roads. You know, there's mostly country lanes. And at night, in the most of the UK, it's blackness. There are no lights. You know that. Out in the countryside, even just on the outskirts of London or wherever you are, we're just on the tip of Surrey and go up the road just a mile, and then it's just blackness. It's blackness. Nobody needs light up there somehow. I don't know how they figured it out. People in the countryside don't need lights. And that's a lot of people don't get that. If something wanted to move about, it only has to wait until dark. And I think the big cats are actually a great example of that.
Yeah, we have some up here, big cats. Yeah.
And you'd be unusual if you didn't have some somewhere in a rural neighborhood.
Yeah.
It just seems to be thousands upon thousands of sightings, you know, collectively, at least in the tens up to 100 a year. To the point where I get one sometimes. I'm like, oh, a big cat sighting. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
So do you want to read that one, Dan?
Yeah. So Wayne says, I like the tales of the Beast of Bodmin. They even got Marines in to comb the area.
Yeah. Yeah. They did. And they, you know, the sign was found, but it's so much further past that now. The Beast of Bodmin was an anomaly back then, and everybody was, and I think that was near to the start of that phenomena as well. So with the big cats, there was an introduction. This is common theory, but I believe in it. The Dangerous Wild Animals Act, 1976, was brought in because people were keeping pumas and cougars and leopards and whatever you like just on their farms, sometimes in their flats. You remember the guy used to walk the lion down in London, down Carnaby Street, and they used to sell them in Harrods, things
That's
like
right.
Buy them, yeah. The woman around the corner from us used to have she had a leopard in a flat in Finchley.
Finchley, there you are. Okay, there you go. So you know exactly what it's like. And as a child of the mid-70s, born in the mid-70s, that was a common thing people talked about.
Right.
They had these pets. So they brought in this Dangerous Wild Animals Act. The stipulations on the enclosure, room to run about, running water, fresh air, all these things that the enclosure had to have, these big cats were prohibitive, even for wealthy people. And people just let them go. Some people confessed to letting them go. Some zoos just let them go when they went under.
Lots of farmers and rock stars as well. They released them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they just let them go. They're perfectly leopards, and you're a zookeeper, so you know this. And leopards and pumas or cougars or mountain lions, whatever you want to call them, are perfectly adapted to this sort of environment. Perfectly adapted. There's no large predators. There's millions of sheep and rabbits and pheasants and game birds and even domestic pets. Everything you can possibly think of. Deer, wild pigs now as well, becoming more popular. And nobody around after dark. Nobody around for the nocturnal animal to just spread out. And I think they were released in a few places around the country, and they just spread and spread and spread and spread. And yet, let's say there's 100 sightings a year, and 45 to 50 out of those sightings are bona fide sightings, and not, a savanna cat or something like that, or a big Maine Coon or something. That's still, I think, just the ones that got caught.
Yeah,
it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've got a specialist opinion on this, but I think by the end of this decade, it'll just be a common fact that we know we have this population of big cats, and yet we have not been able to find them. So if there's food for them, and there's shelter for them, there's shelter for these big creatures as well, which aren't like Bigfoot. They're like you or I, 6 foot tall, 5.5 feet tall. They're different to Bigfoot, and they have, if the theories are correct, a wide Neanderthal-like footprint, which is like our footprint, but wider and broader. So if you saw a footprint, you might just think, oh, somebody's got one of those running shoes, the foot gloves, I call them, foot gloves.
Yes, I know the ones with the individual toes, those ones.
Yeah, get my foot gloves on because, trainers aren't good enough for me anymore. I'm special and going for a run.
Have we got any more questions here?
Yes, I've got William Southey. He says, I've been down there a few times and some of the locals believe in him. I think they're talking about Bigfoot. The army, in my opinion, are not really the best people to look for beast of this nature, to be honest. And I don't think they are either. I agree with that.
No. Do you think that's in reference to the Bodmin situation, actually?
I think it might be,
It might be Bodmin,
Yeah,
and
perhaps not.
Terry Davidson, he's seen a ripped apart carcass on Exmoor and spent many nights sleeping out on Exmoor. So that's another thing, like people they see these carcasses and you think nothing of it. And maybe the proof is in front of you. You're just choosing not to see what it really is.
You might think it's a dog kill. I mean, thousands of sheep are injured by dogs, and some game animals as well every year. And dogs have got sheep again. The dogs have got that deer, or a deer has died, and the badgers and whoever else has come along and nibbled at the carcass and taken it apart. But for those who know, you can look at the bite marks on the neck and everything
quite
else,
easily.
all the telltale signs. Yeah,
because dogs tend to bring, if it's a canine, it will tend to bring a predatory or a prey animal down by its ears, whereas a cat will get by the neck, by the throat. Whereas the dog's all about the ears, pulling it down by the and then, of course, once they've done that, they attack the organs, the soft organs.
I never thought of that, actually. I mean, with the ears and
it's always a head shot with canids. It's always at the head on the ears, bring them down. Whereas with a cat, it's around the neck. Put your muzzle around the throat, choke. Yeah, exactly.
Wayne says the wild man of China was identified as orangutan looking by witnesses, which hasn't which haven't lived in China for years. So they say it's an orangutan, but there's no orangutans in China anymore, is there? So that's a bit confusing.
It is one of the
I love
theories,
orangutans.
actually. Yeah, I love orangutans.
They're great, aren't they?
They're just so, they've got great faces.
They have. They really have.
They just look unimpressed with everything, don't they? It's like, oh, okay, more bananas, put on the pile, you know.
Yeah.
I'll put this jacket on my head.
Yeah. Another banana, great. You don't even eat bananas.
Whoopee.
Yeah, did you learn to be a zookeeper?
Wayne says there are herds of wild boar in Texas that have grown to abnormal sizes that aren't known anywhere else.
Yeah.
Is that a cryptid type of thing as well, do you think?
I think this is an example of an animal. I think this happens in Australia a little as well. An animal growing to its what's it called? It's maximum capacity within optimal conditions. An animal growing to its maximum within optimal conditions. Texas, I mean, there's so much space and there's so much food. Those wild pigs can grow to about 20 stone, and I think boar can get somewhere near that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there are gigantic examples of these creatures. I have a good friend over there who's a hunter and regularly goes out hunting boar, and it's seen as a service by many people because they're just literally tearing up the place. And they're dangerous. They're very dangerous.
They are terrible. Awful.
I'd rather meet a big cat than a wild boar out in the woods. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Terry says that hairy humanoid sounds like himself. I like that, hairy humanoid.
Yeah.
Wayne says, do you think that Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, etc., are the same creature, just different from each other due to their environment or their place in the world?
Well, that's subspecies.
Well, yeah. So in this book, actually, I've argued that they're not, that they're related in a way, but they're not the same types of species. And
like with humans, he says.
Subspecies.
No. Oh yeah, for like a subspecies. So, for example, I think the Sasquatch is this giant man ape. It's not. I don't personally think it's from a human branch. I do think that it's purely an ape. I wonder if the wild man could be perhaps thought to be a sort of Neanderthaloid of a type, but then scientists now believe that if a Neanderthal was existing amongst us in this very time and was smartly dressed in a local cafe, you wouldn't notice him from anybody else.
No.
So
and aren't we supposed to have? We're supposed to have, or some of us are supposed to have their DNA in us, aren't we? Still...
I think Europeans have some. Asians have the most. East Asians have the most Neanderthal DNA. Europeans next. And strangely, people from Africa have the lowest amount of Neanderthal DNA.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I must be to do with the migratory routes, and I suppose there must have been some block to those populations mixing at some point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But then with the Yeti, for example, I think that is like purely ape. This is a relic ape of some kind that's just become partially bipedal. There's more. I mean, there are more tales of quadrupedal movement amongst that particular type of hairy humanoid. Not to say that doesn't happen with the Yowie and Sasquatch either, but seems to be more ease on, in some respects, on four legs. I just wonder, for me, I find it very difficult because I think I don't have a traditional view on materialism, materialistic evolution, and I know that's changing all the time anyway. So those guys that were once, talking more about a common ancestor now than a lineal line from apes to humans, and I'm slightly outside of that. But of course, it is the modern paradigm, and it is where most of the study is being performed. So you do have to at least acknowledge that there could be something in it, and that I've included that in the book, even though it doesn't really fit. Again, this is the belief structure thing, right? It doesn't really fit my belief structure, but I've included the series in there because important, and I could be wrong. But my strongest feeling at the moment is they're not directly related. There is either there's a divergence, or they're very divergent forms of one species. So, for instance, something like a polar bear, a panda bear, a black bear, grizzly, etc., the moon bear, the sun bear, all identifiably bears, but physically quite different. Perhaps that's one way to look at it.
Right, Wayne makes a reference to Point Pleasant. I think he's talking about.
Oh, that's the Mothman, wasn't it?
Mothman again.
Yeah. And Terry says, do you think a lot of these creatures have been around all of the time, but as the human race keeps growing, we are squashing their environments? That's why we are seeing them.
I've got a different theory in that, actually. That they're increasing population. So in Australia, actually, they believe the Yowie population is increasing because the Aboriginals are not inhabiting the land in the way that they used to. They're more towards cities these days. So actually, the more we've drawn away from the countryside, that may have led to an increase in their population in some areas of the world. So I actually believe that perhaps places like Australia, maybe here, if our one exists, and in North America, that they could be increasing. They could be increasing because we are becoming more centralized, more civilized. Or whatever.
I suppose. Yeah, you're right. Tribes aren't. They're not. Tribes not utilizing the land like they used to, are they?
No, we're not. So actually, there's more space for them than there used to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. Good point. David Cook asks, "Is the Beast of Bodmin still around?"
I think there's still sightings there. I haven't kept up with it. Simply, David, because there's so many sightings all over the country. It's not special anymore.
No, it's not.
It was a thing in itself at one point.
Hi,
and now,
Hi, Ben.
It was a thing in itself, and now it's just another notch on the big cat wall.
Yeah, it's become kind of mundane now, isn't it? It's like another sighting, and
they used to all make the news. Yeah.
Chantel wrote something quite funny, which is just her sense of humour. But she's so funny. But she did write here. Well, maybe rather meter boar. Tigers have no growth inhibitor gene.
Yeah.
They never stop growing. So not a cat you'd want to stumble upon.
But they do have a limited life cycle. So.
Yeah. And that's more That's more when
ligers,
when you crossbreed. Yeah, ligers. Yeah. The growth inhibitor's gone then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. Dan, you read this one out.
A question you most probably been asked hundreds of times. What do you think of the theory of alien genetic stroke experiments that have produced them?
I've got a big. It's not a bugbear actually, but I think when we can't figure something out, we invent an impossible hypothesis to explain it. How do people get to it? How do humans get on the Earth? Why is it the only planet that has life that we know of? Well, it's because aliens came down and they set up this system, and then they bred us with these monkeys, and then here we are. And I think, and it's the same thing with Bigfoot and portals, by the way. Bigfoot and portals, or Bigfoot is supernatural. Or Nessie had that for ages. It's supernatural. That's why we can't find it. And I think something in it says when we can't figure this out, there's got to be a sort of get out of jail free card. I couldn't figure out, not because I'm dumb and I can't figure out. It's because aliens did it. It's because there's a portal. I'm a great hunter. I just can't. They disappeared from my sight. I really think it's human psychology. We've come up with an impossible hypothesis to explain a less impossible hypothesis. Still a difficult one. Still a mystery.
Do you think that's the case with David Paulides with the book The 411 thing? Do you think that's probably just naturally a natural thing that happens to people in the wilderness?
Yeah, you fall down cracks in the rocks, and yeah. I know because it would happen to me alone out there. Whenever I hear about one of these hikers in North America going out alone, even here, and then getting lost and he's never seen them, I go, why were you by yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, why? I mean, you especially in like one of the national parks like Yosemite or wherever they are. There's never mind grizzly bears, never mind cougars. A deer can kill you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
They have
Deer,
elks. They
true.
have elks over there, and
They're
elks
massive,
are
aren't they?
scary.
a moose could
Scary.
trample you to death. You could just you fall into a cave system
Yeah.
somewhere, and
Yeah.
there's mine, and nobody would ever cross that path and just starve to death. Like, nobody knows, and I think it's a great series. I love the series. I think he's a great researcher as well, and I'm not diminishing it. He obviously does really great investigations. So
Yeah,
I'm
he
not
seems to
saying,
have found a pattern, doesn't he? But whether that pattern's something that
yeah,
he's seeing as opposed to what's
yeah.
really happening, I
And
don't
as a
know.
person that constantly is looking for
Sorry.
patterns that may or may not be
Absolutely.
true, like the theory in
Absolutely.
this book, maybe they all just want Bigfoot. That's slightly differentiated, but I've split it up because I think this is plausible.
Yeah.
Fully happy to be wrong. Theories are there for a reason to be proven or disproven or played with. Play with this theory now for a little while, and then Dan writes a book 2 years later and said, well, I read that book by Andy and this other guy, and actually I found this evidence that proves, bless you, that
Thank you.
that this is in fact the case, and everybody says, yeah,
Yes.
Dan's cracked it, and it goes on from there, and then you'll
And then
find
somebody
everybody
else will
else
come
saw
along and
that
somebody's
book you did and repeat everything you said for like 10 years, and
I have a theory, because when I was over in North America, they were talking about the smell that comes with the sighting of Bigfoot, and I did get to smell something very similar in Chris's museum. But my theory is, because in America most people want to shoot a Bigfoot when they see it, it's all about killing the thing. And so I think it might have adapted this thing a bit like the skunk, where it throws this smell at you, as a bit like a weapon, like a defense system. Because I'm hearing, and I've seen so many people say that the smell, or these military guys that got up close and apparently killed a family, the smell over them made them so ill that they had to go to hospital for a week afterwards. Do you think that they've, whatever cryptid it is, that they have to adapt some kind of defense mechanism against human beings? Because I think we are a rotten race. I think, we want to kill everything that's different and unusual, hide it in a museum. We won't even put it on display or even use it to learn. We just want it for our own selfish needs and gains. So that's just my theory. I just wondered what you think.
I think about the skunk like smell. I think the same thing. It's defense mechanism. It's more of a warning, I think.
Yeah.
Like, because for most animals, even if it was like bear or something like that, you don't want to come near something that smells terrible and not edible. So those predators would stay away, and perhaps it tells others of their species that they're in their territory. Although I can't imagine that happening by accident so much with a species like that. But for us too, they can't talk to us. They don't want to reveal themselves to us, especially if we're armed, I guess. And it's a good way to get people out. I've also heard of people talk about this infrasound thing, feeling sick, feeling terrified, absolutely terrified, and not realizing why. And then a few seconds later, then the smell hits them, and then a few seconds after that, the sighting hits them. So they got all of that before they got the sighting of the creature. And this is often with people who are not interested in this. They don't have Bigfoot brain. They've never followed it. They just got interested once they had this crazy experience. And that made me feel like there could be something in infrasound. Look, tigers have it, elephants have it, crocodiles have it. Tigers, they believe, can possibly stun their prey into immobility with it, so that when they're trying to corner an animal before the ambush, about this turn, that they could possibly, I don't think it was proven, by the way, was it?
No,
it was
I
suspected.
can see where the theory comes from, to be honest.
Yeah,
definitely.
Have you been up close to them?
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and it's when you get it on you, it wants to make you heave.
Yeah,
it's horrible,
From the tigers, you mean?
Yeah, tigers. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
you've
had that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a nausea, basically. This is fear and nausea, and I've heard about that happening to a lot of people. Now, also been in a situation myself in the forest where I've experienced doing that to myself because I'm suspicious and I've talked myself into a situation. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, is that the infrasound fear? Can I smell something? What's a terrible smell? And then I realize it's me. I'm the smell. And it's just a funny thing with all of these things we're talking about. The funny thing about all of them is they're all sort of they're all superstitious but established principles of cryptozoology.
Yes.
And we lay upon that foundation that's no foundation at all, actually, and we add it to everything we see out there, like the sticks, like the infrasound and everything. Yes, it's worth knowing. And if you did live or don't have that experience, or I had it, and then we saw the creature, I think that's always the qualifier. Not like I was somewhere and I was assailed by this bad smell in the forest. It could always be a dead animal. And then I felt really scared and terrified, and then I ran out of the forest. That's that could just be you being a scaredy cat, and like me.
Me, to be honest.
Yeah.
But there is this thing where they're saying that in folklore that some Bigfoots have been able to communicate with humans somehow. I don't know how. One woman claims that she was taken to a cave, that this particular Bigfoot wanted her as her mate.
Yeah.
There is all this nice stuff with Bigfoot, but also the flip side with this horrible stuff with Bigfoot, throwing rocks and chasing people off. So they must have an extra sensory sort of perception where they know whether you're going to be good or bad to them. There must be. They must have this feeling. I don't know.
If it's the same thing that you just mentioned, though, when the Bigfoot took her to the cave and she realized the Bigfoot wanted to marry her. That's body language, isn't it? And, and maybe they can look at your body language. I always say when you're going to the forest, if you're looking for something like this, like Bigfoot, don't creep. Don't wear camouflage gear. They know you're there. Creeping looks like hunting, and hunting is a warning. Just whistle and talk and laugh and joke. Make a noise, actually, because you're only really, in my opinion, you're only going to see this thing under two circumstances. One, it didn't know you were there and it accidentally stumbled upon it, which I think is like 98% of all sightings.
Yeah.
It was walking, it didn't see you, and then it was like, oh, and everybody always described it looked as worried as I was.
Yeah.
And two, you're making a noise and it's kind of curious about you and it comes to check you out. You're not going to find it because you're looking for it. So don't forget all that hunting stuff. I mean, you have your trail cams and all that. That's stuff you want to monitor things, but the camo gear is not going to help you. You're not going to sneak up on it, basically.
No.
And I just whistle. I just wear normal clothes. I sing a little, but not too much, so it doesn't run away. And
I've told Dan when we go looking for Dogman, he's got to bring some raw pork chops for it as a treat. So rather than giving it, get a fright or making it angry, let's be nice to it and offer it something good to eat. Just a pork chop.
But also think about this: would you feed a bear? Would you bring pork chops to feed a bear? You wouldn't.
No.
And if this thing is what they say it is, it can definitely do as much damage to as a bear.
Well, I would throw it in the opposite direction from where I'm about to run, so it run for the pork chop, and I'm gone that way. You'd
push me over first, though, wouldn't you, Viv?
Yeah.
Yeah, get out of the way, Dan. Yes.
My personal opinion on this is that you should treat this animal as you would a very smart and clever bear, in a way. Something that's as strong in many cases, in the North American case anyway, as strong as a bear. Very fast, very adept and agile, and as an individual, as you would treat another individual animal. So one of the situations I put myself in while out in the forest, when I was talking myself up to the situation and thinking something was happening, was, okay, Andy, you've got like a 2-hour walk out of here now, and if you're in this situation now, you've never considered before if you want it or not. Once you're in a situation, you can't get away from it, and that animal you're about to see is an individual just like you are and has to make a second sort of decision, make a judgment call on what to do about you when it comes face to face, to leave, to walk away like a bear would, or I'm not interested, I'll leave that, or actually I'm kind of hungry, or whatever the situation is with this and with Bigfoot. And then you're there, so it may be a magical experience for a few seconds before it pulls your arms off. But you know, I mean, we don't know. We don't know that these things happen. We talk about the David Paulides show 411, and maybe that's what happens to some folks, or maybe it never does. People just go missing because you know you have accidents.
I think that's what happens. Yeah.
Basically.
Have you ever seen one in at all?
Never. I've never seen any cryptid. I've been to like Champagne, Loch Ness. I've been to different forests all over the place. And have you seen that? We've all seen Jaws, haven't we? Of course. Have you seen the moment when they're on the boat and Roy Scheider is chumming the water, and then it comes out of the water and he sees it, and he goes back and he has this weird sort of look on his face. I practice that look every day, so that when it happens to me, I'm prepared. You know, that I'm ready for that stunned look, and I think I'll just
Dan, you need to prepare too, Dan. You need to prepare your face.
I've got my prepared.
Yeah.
Like that.
Did you used to feed the tigers and the big cats in the zoo? Are you still there?
Yeah. No, I got injured and I retired from it, but I've been out of it for I've still worked with animals, wildlife and stuff, but I retired from the zoo a few years back now because of injuries.
London
but
Zoo?
No, I worked. I worked at one called, but it's going to be Hertfordshire Zoo soon. And I've worked for the UK Wolf Conservation Trust over the years, and I've worked with Woburn and places like that. So you know,
you're really experienced.
That's why he's in charge of the pork chops.
Yeah.
He knows how to feed them. So.
But we used to feed them, but yeah.
Yeah, he'll be savvy. He'll throw them on you and make his escape.
Oh yeah,
he knows. Yeah, he doesn't want him to have just one meal. Just keep him busy for a while. Will he?
I'm fat. I've got to buy myself a lot of time to get away from them.
I know what you mean.
I've got a couple of questions, Dan. If we've got time, just for a couple.
Right.
So Wayne says, do you believe in subterranean dwellers, humanoid people with pale skin that detect by sound?
Yes, but only because I grew up in Wales and we're all that pale. Even now, I've got some colour recently. This is me with a bit of a tan. And that Celtic sheen. I believe, certainly in New York, for example, people were living in the subways and the sewers for a long time because they're proper sewers. In this country, no, because most of our sewers aren't Roman anymore. There's these little sort of thin pipes, which nobody could live in. Cave systems, there's lots of abandoned mines. There could be people there, but I think you've got to think about food sources. Okay, if it's in a city like New York, yes, you can come out after dark. You can just look like a normal person and get your food sources in. In a place like Britain, if you're inhabiting the abandoned mines as a people, as a race of people and not some creature, what are you eating? What are you using for fuel to keep warm? That's going to leave a trace. So, no, not in this country.
No.
Wayne Seaton's got another question. There was a case in Whitehall, New York, where a girl and her brother were confronted by Bigfoot. They did a polygraph on her and found she was telling the truth about the incident. So,
I don't trust the polygraphs.
No, I don't.
Massive. New York's massive. It's not just the
city.
It
is. The state is huge. Yeah.
Massive, it's big, isn't it?
Yeah, I was there when I went to Lake Champlain. I was on the New York side for a bit, Port Henry way, and it's like everywhere. Once you've got something in your mind like the city, you never imagine it to be country-ish. So that polygraph, I think they were telling the truth. I think Paul Bartholomew, he investigates all of those New York sightings. And I think he was quite satisfied with that, as far as I remember. And there has been, a while, there's been some really good sightings around there. There were the policemen as well who saw it.
Yeah.
So that's pretty you don't come out as a policeman and say you've seen something like that.
No.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's a no-no. I think in North America, especially, they do have a viable, valid population. They have a viable, valid population throughout the country, but more so in the Oregon, Washington, all those places than anywhere else. But spread throughout in different degrees, in different population centers. It is, after all, a vast place. Yeah, it would be the fate of the guy who pops out of the bottom of the boat in Jaws after they've just knocked him over. Okay. What's his name?
That is true, Terry.
Whose boat is it?
I can't even answer that, Terry.
Oh, it's that guy.
Ben Gardner. Ben Gardner.
Yes.
It's Ben Gardner's boat.
Yes.
Oh wow, Jaws! What a film.
See, now I want to watch that film again. Now that you put it in my head, now I want to watch it. I haven't seen it for a couple of years.
I literally watched it 2 days ago.
It's epic,
and I went straight to the second one, and I looked at the third one. I was like, no, not on my watch.
Yeah, no.
And the fourth one, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. Even though I love Michael Caine, he's never turned a film down. So you can be brilliant in a crap film if you're Michael Caine, but it's not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. Exactly. Right, are we done, Viv?
We are. I've just got one thing to say. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you.
I've had a lovely time.
And Andy, we need to get you back on. And what do you think, Dan? Should we have
Definitely, yeah, if that's all right, Andy.
Maybe we could get you back on with Cliff. Like, he did say that he's going to come on the show.
Oh wow, that'd be great.
We are going to hold him to that, and we'll get him on the show. We'll get him on a couple of them if we can. But maybe come on and have a chat with Cliff as well. And
I'd love to. He's so nice. Those two in the whole genre, him and Boba, they're just the gentlemen of the big genre, I think. Lovely people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've had really good experiences with him, Viv, haven't you? You speak highly of him.
Yeah, I've met Cliff a couple of times, and lots of questions because I know nothing about it. I'm quite ignorant to because I'm very new to it all, and even to the point where we bought the copy of Bobo's hat. Yeah. And he was selling the shop, but I got Cliff to sign them, and he said, "Well, it's Bobo's hat, not mine. Should I be signing it?" And we just make a laugh and a joke out of it. But he will answer any question that you have, no matter how silly it sounds. If he can answer it or bring an answer to you, he will. He's not put out by anything, And
I think he's really well researched. I'm still, I always describe myself as a sort of a fanboy that started taking it too serious. I got to age 40, almost 6 years ago now, and said, okay, that's it. I'm going to do something else, because we've been working in London like 50 hours a week, me and my wife, 3 hours every day. That London life, pushing people down the stairs of Waterloo, down the escalators of Waterloo, because they've accidentally visited London and standing on the wrong side. That's the first time. Get down those stand on the right, and not knowing myself anymore, and just okay, we saved a bit of money. Let's kind of do some projects each. And she said about the monsters thing, old story now. I always tell it, but I'm still very curious, and even now I've got this massive pile of books for the new book I'm writing, Beast of the World 2, Water Monsters, and a massive pile of books, and just to see the research people have done. And I still realize I don't know anything. Like, I know lots of the theories, I know what I think about some of them, but the great thing about cryptozoology is still up for grabs. It's a science that's still up for grabs.
Yeah.
You can go out and you can think of some theories and you can test them and see if there's anything to them and see if anybody has investigated them before. And that's a joy. You can't do that with anything else as a layman. And that's a nice thing.
I'd love to go what they call squatching with a flask of English tea in the back, in my backpack. So if I do see Bigfoot, I'm going to ask him to sit down and have a cup of tea with me. That's my little fantasy. Couple of cucumbers, just there are nice people out there, and we will leave you a present.
Yeah, and if you're in shock, well, sit down and have a cup of tea. So
sit down and have a cup of tea.
Exactly, it's a win-win situation.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Andy,
Definitely.
thank you so much, and we'll definitely be getting
Thank
you back
you.
on again if that's okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Really
please. Yeah.
appreciate everything. It's been a blast. It's been really enjoyable, and I've learned a lot.
Oh, before you go, have you got a website, or where can they get their books from?
Yeah, okay. So get the books from, they're available everywhere online. So it's Beasts of the World and Beasts of Britain. Those are the two
Yeah.
books. You get them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everything. They're everywhere. But there's also the Beasts of Britain. There's an audiobook. So if if your eyes don't like reading and your ears do the job, well, it's a lovely narrator, an English guy as well. It's in an English accent.
Yeah.
Not mine. It's no mumbles or stumbles. It's all clear. And yeah, and that's free on Audible actually. If you've got Audible, if you're signed up,
Oh, they're brilliant.
Just get it and listen to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Really
again, Andy.
appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Very
Thank
kind
you.
of you.
Lovely
Thank
to
you
meet
ever so
you.
much. And to all of you guys in the chat, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much for coming along and listening to us. And we will speak to you again. Well, we're on next Tuesday, I believe, Viv, aren't we?
We are on the Things Network next
On Things
Tuesday.
Network, and then at Wednesday again, we'll be back on here. And we are now streaming through YouTube, I believe, Viv, aren't we?
We've gone posh.
We've gone posh, haven't we?
We have.
So thanks again, everybody.
See you next week.
next
Bye.
week.
Bye.